The Zodiac Killer. Part 3. The Man They Almost Caught. By 1971, investigators have more evidence on the Zodiac than on almost any other active serial killer in American history. They have his handwriting, dozens of letters spanning 5 years. They have his voice, recorded on 2 separate phone calls to police dispatch. They have physical descriptions from 3 survivors and 3 civilian witnesses who watched him wipe down a cab in San Francisco before walking away into the dark. They have fingerprints lifted from that cab. They have a crosshair symbol he designed himself and signed every letter with. They know what he sounds like. They know roughly what he looks like. They know how he thinks. They do not have a name. The investigation produces hundreds of suspects over the years. Neighbors, ex-co-workers, men whose wives called in tips, men whose brothers called in tips. The Zodiac hotline at the San Francisco Police Department receives so many calls that officers eventually stop treating them as leads and start treating them as noise. But one name keeps coming back: Arthur Lee Allen. Allen is 40 years old when investigators first look seriously at him in 1971. He lives in Vallejo, the same city where 2 of the confirmed attacks happened. He is heavyset. He wears glasses. He is a former elementary school teacher who lost his credential after being accused of molesting a student. He lives alone. He has no alibi for the nights of the murders. The details accumulate in ways that are hard to ignore. Allen tells people before the Zodiac letters become public that he has always wanted to hunt humans, that he thinks of it as the ultimate challenge. He uses the word Zodiac in conversations before the name appears in the newspapers. He owns weapons consistent with those used in the attacks, including a .22 caliber semi-automatic and a 9mm. When investigators first visit him in 1971, he is wearing a Zodiac-brand watch, a brand with a crosshair symbol on the face, nearly identical to the one the killer signs his letters with. He is brought in for questioning. He sits across from detectives for hours. He does not confess. He does not crack. He takes a polygraph. He fails it. But failing a polygraph is not evidence. You cannot arrest someone for wearing a watch. Investigators search his property in 1972. They find nothing conclusive. They search again in 1991. Allen is in his early 60s by now. He has served time for child molestation, unrelated to the Zodiac case, and is living in a mobile home in Vallejo. Officers execute a search warrant and remove boxes of material: chemicals, guns, letters, tools. Inside one of those boxes, they find a wetsuit with a knife holder on the sleeve. The Lake Berryessa attack in September 1969 happened near the water. The killer wore a hood and carried a knife. They also find something else: writings that reference the Zodiac. None of it rises to the level of an arrest. Everything is circumstantial. There is no physical evidence directly connecting Allen to any of the crime scenes. No fingerprint match, no fiber match, no witness who can place him at a location on the nights of the murders. Arthur Lee Allen dies of kidney failure on August 26, 1992. He is never charged. 10 years later, in 2002, the San Francisco Police Department attempts something that wasn't possible in Allen's lifetime: DNA. Investigators collect a sample from the back of a stamp on one of the Zodiac letters. The Zodiac licked those stamps. If his DNA is on them, and if it can be isolated cleanly enough, they can compare it to Allen's sample, obtained from his relatives after his death, and either confirm or eliminate him permanently. The results come back, and the room goes quiet. The DNA does not match Arthur Lee Allen, the man investigators spent 30 years building a case against, the man who failed the polygraph, who wore the watch, who owned the weapons, who talked about hunting humans. His DNA is not on the letters. But there is a problem. The chain of custody for the stamps is disputed. The letters passed through many hands over 3 decades: newsrooms, police evidence rooms, investigators who handled them without gloves. Contamination is possible. The sample itself is small and degraded. Some investigators believe the DNA belongs to a postal worker, not the Zodiac. Others believe it belongs to the killer and that Allen is genuinely eliminated. The question has never been resolved. The case file stays open. The survivor identifications make everything more complicated. Mike Mageau, the man who survived the Blue Rock Springs shooting in July 1969, who was shot twice and left for dead, is shown a photo lineup in 2009, 40 years after the attack. He looks through the photographs slowly. He picks Arthur Lee Allen. He says he is certain. Brian Hartnell, who survived the Lake Berryessa attack, who spoke with the killer for several minutes before being stabbed, cannot make a visual identification. The man was wearing a hood, but Hartnell describes the voice. Calm, deliberate, unhurried. A man who spoke as if he had planned everything he was going to say before he arrived. Majot's identification, the voice description, the watch, the weapons, the word Zodiac, used before anyone else was using it, and DNA that doesn't match. Investigators are left with a suspect who fits everything except the one piece of evidence that cannot be argued with. Then there are the 37. In his letters, the Zodiac claims 37 victims. Investigators have confirmed 5 deaths. 2 people survived. That leaves 30 people unaccounted for, either victims who were never connected to the Zodiac, or a number he invented to make himself sound larger and more terrifying than he was. Some cold case researchers believe there are additional victims. Unsolved murders in Northern California from the late 1960s and early 1970s that match the Zodiac's methods. Isolated locations, couples, no witnesses, no motive. None have been officially linked. Others believe the 37 is theater, that the Zodiac was a man who wanted to be feared more than he wanted to be accurate, that the number is part of the performance. No one can prove either. The "My name is Oz" cipher, the 13-symbol code he sent in April 1970, has still never been solved. Every major code-breaking effort that cracked the Z408 and eventually the Z340 has been unable to open it. Some cryptographers believe it is a genuine cipher that simply doesn't have enough characters to break through statistical analysis. Others believe it is deliberately unsolvable, a taunt, a final middle finger from a man who spent 5 years controlling the narrative. If it is real, his name is sitting inside those 13 symbols, written in his own hand, sent to the police in 1970, and no one has been able to read it. The Zodiac killed 5 confirmed people between December 1968 and October 1969. He sent coded letters to newspapers for 5 years. He taunted police, threatened children, sent pieces of his victims' clothing as proof. He called dispatch himself after 2 of the attacks to make sure the bodies were found. And then he stopped. No arrest, no deathbed confession, no letter explaining why. Arthur Lee Allen, the only suspect who ever had serious traction, died without being charged and without being fully eliminated. Mike Majot picked him out of a lineup. His DNA didn't match the stamps. Both of those things are true at the same time. The fingerprints lifted from Paul Stein's cab have never matched anyone in the system. The voice on the 2 phone calls has never been identified. The case is officially open. Somewhere in the history